Hi, this is Kelsey for AP Gov 5-Minute Review, and in this brief segment, we're going to be looking at the mass media. So when we talk about the mass media, we're talking primarily about television, radio, and newspapers, which have the ability to reach broad audiences. Now, these are traditionally the three major sources of the mass media, but this has significantly changed, especially in the past 10 to 15 years. If you look on this chart on the right-hand side, you'll notice that this is newspaper circulation, and we're only talking from the period of September 2003 to September 2009. You'll notice that the trend has significantly decreased for the number of people subscribing to newspapers, and the same trend is similar to those listening to the radio as well as watching television. These are no longer the main sources of information. This has now changed to high-tech media. We're talking things like Twitter. We're talking about people with their own blogs. We're talking about Facebook, etc. You now even have candidates announcing their own candidacies for whatever office it may be via high-tech media. So the whole entire landscape of mass media is rapidly changing. Now, when we look at some of the major functions of the mass media, of course, there's entertainment, information such as news reports, but very important is the watchdog effect. Sometimes the media is referred to as the fourth branch that's sort of checking the other branches to make sure they're not up to any wrongdoing, that there aren't any scandals. That plays a major role if you're familiar with the Watergate scandal as well. The media is also a goalkeeper in the sense that it allows certain items in that it's going to broadcast and it's going to keep other things out. So it has that role because you only have so much time. In addition, they also serve as the scorekeeper, meaning that if there's a political fight between two major people or parties, they're going to sort of keep score. They're going to say who's ahead, who they don't think is ahead, and they provide all that analysis and so forth. But perhaps the biggest function, aside from the fourth branch function, is the agenda setting effect. Absolutely know this. I cannot stress this enough, that they set the agenda. Because when you turn on the television, you watch the news, you don't get to pick and choose. It's the media that gets to pick and choose, for better or worse. And that's a whole other issue. But certainly the idea that the mass media can set the agenda, what are people talking about, what are politicians going to talk about, that is a huge effect right there. So certainly the development of the mass media began with Teddy Roosevelt with press conferences, and these became daily with his cousin FDR. Now today you have the White House press corps and you have the press secretary who are dedicated just to the executive branch. Now earlier on there was a very cozy relationship with the president up until about the 1960s. This is when we had the Watergate scandal, you had the Vietnam War, and this is going to lead to less favorable coverage. And this really ushers in an era of investigative journalism where you're going to be seeing news outlets begin to investigate other politicians, begin to investigate any sources of wrongdoing perhaps, and certainly this is going to be a major role and function of the media. All right, moving on. So the media, specifically talking about television and radio, is regulated by the FCC. Now, there are some regulations with respect to what you can and cannot say. Now, when we're talking about the media, if we're talking about a big scandal, there's nothing the government can do to censor that content. That's also called prior restraint. However, there is what's called libel, in which print media, specifically newspapers, can actually be sued for saying something malicious that is damaging. Also, the media can be fined by the FCC for obscenities, such as if they're cursing, such as if they're showing, let's say hypothetically, pornography, not that they necessarily would. So there are some limitations on the media. However, by and large, the mass media has a lot of free reign. Also dealing with the media, you have what are known as trial balloons. This is when you would leak something for the purpose of assessing what is the political reaction. If it's good, then you might leak more of it. You come out, and vice versa. Also, you have narrowcasting, especially with more channels. You have a specific programming that's aimed towards a particular audience. For example, those who watch C-SPAN want to know what's happening inside of Congress. And then sound bites, about only 10 seconds long. There was less coverage towards covering political candidates, and there's only a 10-second snippet of what a candidate has to say, and this has significantly shortened over the course of history. Remember that democracy and the media go one in one, and remember, information is the fuel of democracy. In many ways, it allows for our democracy to continue with people being ignorant of what's going on. that certainly is not good. You will not have informed voters, and thus that could be certainly an issue in a democracy if you do not have well-informed voters.